I'm Jessica Chen, 72 years old. 4 months ago, I watched my cousin's tech startup implode on the cover of Forbes, built entirely on my stolen business concept. The company that just lost $150 million, that was supposed to be mine. Let me be clear about something right from the start. I'm not telling you this story for sympathy. I'm telling you because what happened to me, the systematic dismissal, the intellectual theft, the public humiliation followed by spectacular vindication needs to be documented. Because somewhere out there, someone in your life is doing exactly what my family did to me, and you need to see how this ends. Before I continue, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to know how this story ends. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. I grew up in Palo Alto, California, in a family that worshipped at the altar of prestigious credentials. My father, Robert Chen, was a venture capitalist at Sequoia Capital. My mother, Patricia Chen, held a doctorate in computer science from Stanford. My older brother, Marcus, graduated from MIT with dual degrees in electrical engineering and business administration. And then there was me. I went to San Jose State University. Not Stanford, not Berkeley, not even UCLA. San Jose State, a perfectly respectable school that my family treated like community college. I studied computer science and graduated with a 3.9 GPA, which would have been impressive to anyone except my parents, who asked why it wasn't a 4.0. Jessica's our practical child, my mother would say at dinner parties, which was code for the one who isn't brilliant. Meanwhile, Marcus worked at Google, pulling in $3,400 a year, and my parents couldn't stop talking about him. But here's what they never understood. Being underestimated gave me something priceless: freedom. While my family obsessed over appearances and prestige, I actually learned how things worked. I spent 7 years as a software engineer at a mid-sized healthcare tech company called Medstream Solutions. Not sexy. Not something my father could brag about at his country club. But I was in the trenches, seeing real problems that needed real solutions. By 2018, I'd identified a massive gap in the healthcare industry. Medical practices were drowning in administrative overhead, insurance verification, prior authorization, claims processing. The existing software solutions were clunky, expensive, and built by people who'd never actually worked in a medical office. I'd spent 3 years doing consulting work on the side for various clinics, and I'd seen the same problems everywhere. So I built something. Nights and weekends, for 18 months, I developed a prototype, an AI-powered administrative automation platform specifically designed for small to medium medical practices. It could reduce administrative costs by 60–70% while improving accuracy. I called it CareStream AI. The prototype was beautiful. Clean interface, intuitive workflow, machine learning that actually worked. I had 3 beta clients, small practices in San Jose, and they were seeing results within weeks. Dr. Reena Patel's dermatology practice cut their administrative staff from 4 people to 1. Dr. Marcus Holbrook's family medicine office reduced claim denial rates from 18% to 3%. I had the code. I had the proof of concept. I had testimonials. What I didn't have was $2 million in seed funding to scale it properly. November 28, 2019. Thanksgiving at my parents' house in Los Altos Hills, a 6,808 square foot Mediterranean revival that my father loved reminding people was worth $4 million. The whole family was there: my parents, Marcus and his wife Claire, and my cousin Brandon Chen. Brandon was my uncle's son, fresh off getting his MBA from Harvard Business School. He was 27 years old, had worked in management consulting at McKinsey for exactly 2 years, and had recently quit to pursue entrepreneurship. He had 0 technical skills, 0 experience building anything, but he had that Harvard MBA and my father's ear. After dinner, we gathered in my father's study: mahogany paneling, leather chairs, a humidor of Cuban cigars. My father poured Macallan Vindictive into crystal glasses. This was his boardroom. "So Brandon," my father said, "tell us about your startup plans." Brandon launched into a pitch about disrupting legacy industries and leveraging AI for operational efficiency. It was buzzword soup. He had no product, no team, no concrete idea, just vibes and vocabulary. Then my father turned to me. "Jessica, didn't you mention you were working on some sort of project?" Some sort of project. 7 years of industry experience and 18 months of development, reduced to some sort of project. But I was prepared. I'd brought my laptop, loaded with my presentation, demo videos, beta client testimonials, financial projections. I spent 40 minutes walking them through everything: the market opportunity, dollars, the competitive landscape, the technology architecture, the growth strategy, the path to profitability. I showed them real numbers. Dr. Patel's practice saved $60 in its first 6 months. Dr. Holbrook's claim processing time dropped from 14 days to 14 hours. I had a 5-year projection showing how a $2 million seed round could turn into a $50 million series within 3 years. When I finished, there was silence. My father sipped his scotch. It's interesting, Jessica, but healthcare tech is extremely competitive. The regulatory environment is complex. This would require sophisticated business strategy, investor relations, go-to-market execution. I have a go-to-market strategy, I said. I've already validated product market fit with 3 practices. I have 17 more on a wait list I've mapped out. The thing is, my mother interrupted, and I don't mean this unkindly, but building a prototype is very different from scaling a business. That requires a specific skill set, leadership, vision. I've been leading this project for Brandon, my father said, turning away from me entirely. What do you think about Jessica's idea? I watched Brandon's eyes light up. It's actually brilliant. The market timing is perfect. Healthcare costs are exploding, practices are desperate for solutions. With the right execution, this could be huge. See, my father beamed. That's strategic thinking. Brandon leaned forward. Mr. Chen, if Jessica would be willing to share her research and technical specifications, I think I could turn this into something really special. I've got contacts at several VC firms from my McKinsey days. With my business background and her technical groundwork, we could build something incredible. I felt ice forming in my chest. You want me to hand over my IP? Not hand over, Brandon said smoothly. Partner. You'd be like CDO or head of engineering. I'd handle the business side, fundraising, strategy, hiring, operations. We'd split equity, maybe 60-40. I'd need controlling stakes since I'd be CEO and interfacing with investors. Jessica, my mother said gently. This could be a wonderful opportunity. Brandon has the credentials that VCs look for. Harvard MBA, McKinsey background. That opens doors. I built this, I said quietly. Every line of code, every client relationship, every insight, it's mine. My father set down his glass. Jessica, don't be childish. Brandon isn't trying to steal anything. He's offering you a chance to see your idea reach its potential. Frankly, I'm not sure you have the executive presence to attract serious funding. VCs invest in pedigree. Brandon has that. And I don't. You're a very capable engineer, my mother said. But leading a company requires a different skill set. Brandon has formal training in business strategy, financial modeling, organizational leadership. I've spent 3 years teaching myself all of that. Teaching yourself isn't the same as an MBA from Harvard. My father said flatly. Look, if you want to keep this as a side project, fine. But if you want it to become something real, you need someone like Brandon at the helm. The room felt like it was tilting. My own father, a venture capitalist who evaluated startups for a living, was telling me I wasn't qualified to run a company I'd built from scratch. I'm going to pass, I said, my voice barely steady. I'll find funding elsewhere. My father shrugged. Suit yourself. But you're making a mistake. Brandon, if you want to pursue something in this space, let me know. I know people. Over the next 3 weeks, Brandon called me 6 times. He was friendly, casual, framing it as picking my brain about the healthcare tech space. Like an idiot, I answered his questions. I told him about the specific pain points I'd identified. I explained why existing solutions failed. I walked him through my research on compliance requirements, integration challenges, the exact features that made CareStream different. I didn't send him my code. I didn't send him my business plan, but I gave him the roadmap. On December 18, 2019, I got an email from my father. Jessica, Brandon is moving forward with a healthcare automation startup. He's calling it MedFlow AI, different name, different approach, but in the same general space as your project. I hope there are no hard feelings. There's room for multiple players in any market. Dad, I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I immediately called Brandon. He didn't answer. I texted. Nothing. I drove to my parents' house. My mother answered the door. He's not stealing your idea, she said before I could speak. Healthcare automation is a broad category. Brandon's approach will be completely different. Mom, we had a 40-minute conversation where I explained my exact methodology. Conversations aren't proprietary, Jessica. You didn't patent anything. You didn't even incorporate. Brandon's pursuing his own vision. With Dad's help. Your father believes in him. Brandon has the background to execute at a high level. Honestly, Jessica, this competitive streak isn't attractive. I stood there on my childhood doorstep shaking. Am I even your daughter? Don't be dramatic. You're upset because someone else is succeeding where you hesitated. That's not our fault. She closed the door. I know some of you watching have been through something similar. If this is resonating with you, drop a comment below. Let me know you're here, and if you want to know what happened next, because trust me, this gets intense, make sure you're subscribed. In January 2020, Brandon incorporated Medflow AI. My father introduced him to 3 venture capital firms. In March, Brandon raised $2 in seed funding from Andreessen Horowitz and 2 other prominent VCs. The pitch deck, which I never saw but heard about through family channels, described AI-powered administrative automation for medical practices. My exact concept. I was still running Carestream as a nights and weekend project, still working my day job, still trying to bootstrap. I'd approached 6 VCs. All of them passed. One literally told me, "Great idea, but you don't have the background we look for in founding CEOs." Meanwhile, Brandon was on the cover of TechCrunch. Harvard MBA's Medflow AI raises $3.2 million to transform healthcare administration. The article quoted my father. Brandon represents the next generation of technical founders, combining elite business training with a sophisticated understanding of AI applications. Brandon had never written a line of code in his life. By June 2020, Medflow had hired 20 employees, including several engineers poached from major tech companies with equity packages I couldn't compete with. They launched a beta product that looked suspiciously similar to my prototype, though clearly built by people who'd never actually worked with medical practices. It was over-engineered, clunky, and missed key use cases. But it had the Harvard MBA stamp. It had my father's network. It had buzz. In October 2020, Medflow raised a $28 million from Sequoia, my father's firm, and 2 other major funds. Brandon was now CEO of a company valued at $120 million on paper. At Thanksgiving that year, my father actually said, "Maybe you could apply for a job at Medflow, Jessica. I'm sure Brandon would interview you for an engineering position." I stopped going to family dinners. Over the next 3 years, I watched Brandon become a tech celebrity. Medflow raised a $95 million Series B in 2021, followed by a $5 in The company was valued at $1.8 billion. Brandon appeared on CNBC, spoke at Web Summit, got profiled in Fortune. My parents hosted a party when Medflow hit unicorn status. I wasn't invited. I kept running Carestream, but I'd basically given up on scaling it. I had 12 clients, all small practices, generating about $11,000 in annual revenue, enough to quit my day job, but not enough to hire a team. I was a lifestyle business. Brandon was building an empire. Except I started hearing things. Dr. Patel, one of my original beta clients, mentioned that her friend's practice had signed with Medflow and was having issues. A nurse I knew from my consulting days told me Medflow's software looked impressive but didn't actually work very well. A former colleague reached out to say he'd interviewed at Medflow and was disturbed by the chaos he'd observed. In early 2023, I saw a forum post from a practice administrator. "Anyone else having problems with Medflow? We've been using it for 6 months, and our claim denial rate has actually increased. Support is non-responsive." Then another. "Medflow promised 60% cost reduction. We're seeing maybe 15%, considering canceling." And another. "Is Medflow just vaporware with good marketing?" Something was wrong. On April 12th, 2023, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. david.morrison@whistleblowerlegal.com. Subject: urgent. Carestream AI and Medflow AI. The email read, "Ms. Chen, my name is David Morrison, attorney at Morrison & Price LLP. I represent a former Medflow AI engineer who has reason to believe the company may have misappropriated your intellectual property. Would you be willing to speak confidentially? This is time sensitive." My hands shook as I dialed the number in his signature. David Morrison had a calm, precise voice. "Ms. Chen, thank you for calling. I'll get straight to it. My client, whom I can't name yet, worked at Medflow for 18 months as a senior engineer. He left 3 weeks ago after discovering something troubling." "What?" "Medflow's core technology doesn't work, never has. The AI models are essentially smoke and mirrors. They produce outputs that look sophisticated but lack the underlying logic for accurate medical billing automation. The company has been faking demonstrations and cherry-picking metrics for investors." I felt dizzy. That would mean fraud, securities fraud, specifically. They've raised nearly $3 million on false claims about their technology's capabilities. But here's where you come in. My client found internal documents, emails, development notes referencing something called the Chen methodology and the original Carestream architecture. There are explicit discussions about using your technical approach as a blueprint. I never gave them my code. "No, but did you discuss your methodology with Brandon Chen?" "Yes. December 2019. He asked me to explain how my system worked." "Did you sign any NDAs?" "No, it was Thanksgiving. We were family." Ms. Chen, I believe Brandon Chen and Medflow deliberately appropriated your intellectual property, used it as the basis for their pitch to investors, but failed to actually build working technology around it. They've been selling vaporware for 3 years. Why are you telling me this? Because my client is filing a whistleblower complaint with the SEC. He has extensive documentation. But your story, the original founder whose IP was stolen, makes the fraud narrative much stronger, and you might have legal claims of your own. My head was spinning. I need time to think. You have 48 hours. After that, my client files, and this becomes public. If you want to be part of the action, I need an answer soon. I spent the next 2 days in a fog. I reviewed every email, every text, every conversation I'd had with Brandon. I pulled up my original Carestream development logs, time-stamped commits, going back to 2017. I contacted Dr. Patel and asked if she'd be willing to provide a testimonial about Carestream's effectiveness versus Medflow's failures. Absolutely, she said. Medflow is garbage dressed up in a fancy UI. Your system actually works. On April 14th, I called David Morrison. I'm in. Over the next 4 months, David and I built an airtight case. His client, whose name I learned was James Wu, a former senior engineering lead at Medflow, had kept meticulous records. Emails from Brandon explicitly referencing Jessica's architecture, Slack messages where engineers discussed reverse engineering the Carestream approach, internal company presentations showing that Medflow's AI models had accuracy rates of only 47% when they'd claimed 94% to investors. James had also documented a meeting where Brandon told the engineering team, "We don't need it to work perfectly. We just need it to work well enough for demos. By the time clients realize the limitations, we'll have raised enough to fix it." That quote would prove to be devastating. I provided documentation showing my original Carestream development timeline 2017-2019. Emails and call logs with Brandon from December 2019. Testimonials from my 12 clients showing Carestream's actual performance. Comparative analysis showing Medflow's architecture matched my descriptions. David also connected me with Dr. Sarah Brennan, a technology forensics expert, who analyzed both codebases. Her conclusion: while the code itself is different, the logical architecture, feature prioritization, and problem-solving approach in Medflow's system are substantially similar to Carestream's methodology. The probability of independent invention is extremely low. In July, James Wu filed his whistleblower complaint with the SEC. Case Trees. The SEC launched an investigation into Medflow AI for securities fraud, false advertising, and misrepresentation to investors. In August, I filed a civil lawsuit against Brandon Chen and Medflow AI for misappropriation of trade secrets, breach of fiduciary duty, and unjust enrichment. Case 2023 CV-08884 in the Superior Court of California, Santa Clara County. On September 19, Wall Street Journal broke the story. Medflow AI under SEC investigation for fraud, founder accused of stealing tech from cousin. That was the first time I'd been identified publicly. Within hours, my phone was flooded with calls from reporters, lawyers, VCs, and random people offering their opinions, but the call I'll never forget was from my mother. "Jessica, what have you done?" Her voice was shaking. "I filed a lawsuit because Brandon stole my work and built a fraudulent company with it. You're destroying your cousin's life. You're destroying our family." Brandon destroyed his own life by lying to investors. "I'm just telling the truth. Your father's devastated. Do you understand that his firm invested in Medflow? This makes him look like a fool." And there it was, not concern for me, for what had been stolen from me. Concern for my father's reputation. "Mom, Brandon raised $100 billion for technology that doesn't work. He used my research as a blueprint and then failed to actually build it. That's fraud. You're being vindictive because he succeeded where you failed." "I didn't fail. I was stolen from. Sequoia is pulling out of Medflow. Your father's reputation is in tatters. Brandon is facing criminal charges. Our family name is not my responsibility. I built something real. Brandon built a lie. I'm not apologizing for telling the truth." She hung up on me. That night my father sent me a single text: "You are no longer my daughter." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I blocked his number. What would you do in this situation? Comment 1 if you'd have done the same thing. 2 if you'd have stayed silent to preserve family peace. I want to know what you think. October was brutal for Medflow. The SEC investigation expanded to include several executives and board members. Forbes published an exposé How Medflow AI Fooled Silicon Valley, a $1.8 billion house of cards. The article included interviews with former employees, including James Wu. He described a company culture built on deception. We were told to prioritize aesthetics over functionality. Brandon Chen didn't understand the technology at all. He'd make promises to investors that were technologically impossible, then yell at engineers for not being innovative enough when we couldn't deliver. Medflow's Series D funding round, which had been expected to close at $4 million, collapsed. 3 major clients terminated their contracts and filed breach of contract suits. The company's valuation plummeted from $1.8 billion to somewhere around $5 million. In late October, Medflow's board forced Brandon to step down as CEO. He was replaced by an outside crisis manager whose first move was to lay off 60% of staff. Brandon retained a white shoe law firm Covington & Burling and filed a countersuit against me for defamation and tortious interference. His position: I was a disgruntled family member with a similar but inferior product who was weaponizing false allegations to destroy a competitor. David Morrison, who'd become more than just my attorney, he was my ally, my voice, my goddamn hero, and all this was ready. Let him try. Discovery is going to eviscerate him. On December 20th, I sat across from Brandon Chen for the first time in 4 years. We were in a conference room at my attorney office, Morrison & Price LLP, 30th floor, 1 Market Street, San Francisco. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Bay Bridge. Brandon looked terrible. He'd lost weight. His Trehauer form and Tom Ford suit hung on him. His lawyer, Patricia Winters from Covington, sat beside him with a stack of documents and an expression that suggested she knew this was going badly. My deposition had happened 2 weeks earlier. I'd been calm, detailed, methodical. I'd walked through every email, every conversation, every piece of evidence. 4 hours of testimony that David said was near perfect. Now it was Brandon's turn. David started gentle. Mr. Chen, how would you describe your relationship with Jessica Chen prior to November 2019? We were cousins. Family. Close? Reasonably close. Did you attend the same family gatherings? Yes. Including Thanksgiving 2019 at Robert and Patricia Chen's residence? Yes. At that gathering, did Jessica Chen give a presentation about a healthcare administration technology she'd developed? Brandon shifted. She mentioned a project she was working on. Just mentioned, or did she provide a detailed presentation with demonstrations, financial projections, and technical specifications? Pause. It was fairly detailed. How long did her presentation last? I don't remember exactly. David pulled out a document. Text message from you to your then-girlfriend, November 29th, 2009, 11:47 p.m. Jessica did this insane 40-minute pitch. Pretty sure she's onto something huge. Going to pick her brain more. Does that refresh your memory? Brandon's face went pale. Yes, it was approximately 40 minutes. David spent the next 2 hours methodically destroying him. He showed emails where Brandon had asked me increasingly specific technical questions. He showed my responses. He showed internal Medflow documents referencing JC's approach and the original Carestream model. Then David pulled out the kill shot. Mr. Chen, I'm showing you an internal Medflow email dated March 14, 2020. From you to your CDO, Peter Stills. Subject line, architecture plan. You wrote, and I quote, talked to Jessica extensively about her methodology. She's nailed the core logic, but doesn't understand how to scale it. We can take her approach and enterpriseize it. She'll never have the resources to compete. Did you write this email? Brandon stared at the document. His lawyer touched his arm, whispered something. He shook his head. Yes. So you admit you appropriated Jessica Chen's methodology? No, we had a conversation. Conversations aren't. Did you tell Jessica Chen you were going to use her methodology as the basis for Medflow? It wasn't. Yes or no, Mr. Chen? No. Did you ask Jessica's permission to use her technical approach? There was no formal yes or no. No. Did you offer Jessica any equity, credit, or compensation for the methodology you describe in this email as her approach? Silence. Mr. Chen? No. David leaned back. One final question. You've raised approximately $and from investors by claiming Medflow's technology could reduce administrative costs by 60-70% and achieve 94% accuracy in claims processing. Is that correct? That was the target. What are the actual performance metrics? Brandon looked at his lawyer. She shook her head minutely. Mr. Chen, you're under oath. The accuracy rate in production is approximately 37%. Cost reduction average is 15%. So you lied to investors. We were working to improve. Did you tell Sequoia Capital, Andreessen Horowitz, or any other investor that your technology was not performing as claimed? We provided regular updates. Did you tell them your accuracy was 47% when you'd claimed 94%? Not in those exact terms. Did you tell them, yes or no? No. The deposition ended. Brandon's lawyer immediately requested a recess. David and I walked back to his office, and for the first time in 6 months, I felt something like hope. We have him, David said. Between your evidence and James Wu's whistleblower documentation, this case is a slam dunk. The SEC will likely file criminal charges. Your civil case is going to sell. How much? Conservatively, $15 million. If we push and win at trial, could be significantly more. On February 22 and 2024, the SEC filed criminal charges against Brandon Chen, Medflow AI's former CDO Peter Stills, and 2 board members. The charges: securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to defraud investors. The indictment was scathing. It detailed how Medflow had systematically misrepresented its technology's capabilities, cherry-picked data for investor presentations, and concealed material facts about product performance. It specifically noted that Medflow's initial architecture was substantially based on methodology developed by Jessica Chen and appropriated without permission or compensation. The indictment also revealed something I hadn't known. Medflow had been internally tracking the discrepancy between claimed and actual performance since June 2020. They'd known for 3 years that their technology didn't work as advertised, and they'd raised $2 to $80 million during that period. Brandon was arrested at his home in Atherton, California, on February 23rd. At 6:04 a.m., the news footage showed him in handcuffs, being led to a police car. His bail was set at $2 million. My phone exploded. Every tech publication wanted a statement. TechCrunch, Stolen Dreams, how Brandon Chen built a $1 bill fraud in his cousin's work. Forbes, the dark side of Stanford MBA culture, when pedigree matters more than product. I gave one interview to Emily Chang at Bloomberg Technology. Jessica, she asked, how do you feel watching your cousin face criminal charges? I chose my words carefully. I don't take pleasure in anyone's suffering, but I do believe in accountability. Brandon didn't just steal from me, he stole from investors, from employees, from medical practices who trusted his product. Justice isn't about revenge, it's about truth. Do you regret going public? No. Silence protects the wrong people. The truth might be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. What about your family? Your father invested in Medflow through Sequoia. My father chose business over integrity. He chose credentials over substance. He chose Brandon over me, not because Brandon was bare, but because Brandon had a Harvard MBA. That's his mistake to live with, not mine. On March 18, 2024, after 6 months of litigation and facing overwhelming evidence, Medflow AI's bankruptcy trustee approached us with a settlement offer. The company was being liquidated. Assets were being sold off. The offer, $18.3 million, paid from insurance policies and liquidated assets. Full admission of wrongdoing. Public acknowledgement that Medflow's technology was based on my misappropriated intellectual property. David looked at me. We could push for more, but bankruptcy proceedings are messy. This is a substantial recovery. I'll take it, I said. This was never about the money. Yes, it was, David said gently. And that's okay. You built something valuable, and it was stolen. You deserve compensation. On March 25, 2024, the settlement was finalized. In addition to the $18.3 million payment to me, the bankruptcy court ruled that I owned all rights to the Medflow brand and remaining technology assets. I didn't want the Medflow brand. It was poisoned. But I did acquire 3 things: a list of every practice that had tried Medflow and been disappointed, several talented engineers who wanted to rebuild the product properly, validation. In April 2024, I formally relaunched Carestream AI, this time with real resources. I hired 6 engineers, including 2 from the Medflow liquidation, who knew exactly where Brandon had gone wrong. I brought on a proper business operations team. I rented office space in Sunnyvale. I also hired a CEO. Yes, you read that right. I hired someone else to be CEO, not because I wasn't capable, but because I realized I didn't want that job. I loved building technology. I loved solving problems. I loved working with medical practices to make their lives better. I didn't love fundraising, board meetings, and strategic press interviews. Her name was Dr. Linda Castillo, former COO of Athena Health, MBA from Wharton, 20 years of healthcare tech experience. She was brilliant, connected, and most importantly, she believed in the product because it actually worked. Jessica, she said in our first meeting, I've seen 100 healthcare tech pitches. Most are vaporware, yours is the real thing. I'd be honored to help scale it. In May, we raised a $12 million Series A from Index Ventures and several angel investors. This time when I pitched, I had a CEO beside me who had the pedigree VCs wanted, but I also had something Brandon never had, a product that actually delivered on its promises. By June, we had 37 clients. Real revenue. Real growth, not hype. Brandon Chen's criminal trial began on July 9, 2024, in the United States District Court for the Northern District of California. I attended every day. The prosecution was methodical. They showed the jury emails, Slack messages, financial documents, expert testimony. James Wu took the stand and described a culture of deliberate deception. Several Medflow clients testified about promises made and broken. I took the stand on July 18th. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Margaret Hayes, walked me through everything: my development of CareStream, the Thanksgiving 2009 conversation, Brandon's subsequent appropriation of my methodology, his lies to investors. Brandon's lawyer, Patricia Winters, tried to shake me on cross-examination. Ms. Chen, isn't it true that you're simply a competitor who's bitter about Mr. Chen's success? No, I said calmly. I'm a technologist whose intellectual property was stolen and then used as the basis for securities fraud. There's a difference between competition and theft. But you can't patent an idea. No, but you can't lie to investors about technology that doesn't work. Brandon used my methodology as proof of concept to raise hundreds of millions of dollars for a product he never successfully built. Your company has only 37 clients. Medflow, at its peak, had over 200. Doesn't that suggest his execution was superior? His execution involved fraud. I'd rather have 37 satisfied clients than 200 defrauded ones. The trial lasted 3 weeks. On July 30, 2024, the jury deliberated for 7 hours and returned a verdict, guilty on all counts. Brandon Chen was sentenced on September 12, 2024. 12 years in federal prison. $47 million in restitution to investors. Lifetime ban from serving as an officer or director of a public company. His CDO, Peter Stills, got 8 years. The 2 board members who'd been charged got probation and fines for their roles in concealing information from investors. I didn't attend the sentencing. I'd said what I needed to say. The rest was between Brandon and the consequences of his choices. On October 3, 2004, my mother called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Jessica. Her voice was small. Can we talk? About what? About everything. Your father and I would like to see you. I met them at a coffee shop in Palo Alto Neutral Ground. They looked older, tired. My father spoke first. Jessica, we owe you an apology. I waited. We failed you, he continued. We prioritized credentials over character. We assumed that because Brandon had the right background, he had the right skills. We dismissed you because you didn't fit our idea of what success looked like. You told me I wasn't your door? He flinched. I said that in anger. It was unforgivable. Yes, it was. My mother reached across the table. I didn't take her hand. Jessica, we spent so much of your life telling you that you weren't enough. We measured you against Marcus, against Brandon, against some imaginary standard that had nothing to do with your actual worth. We were wrong. Why now? I asked. Because I won. Because the daughter you dismissed is now worth $18 million and running a successful company. Would you be here if Brandon had succeeded and I'd stayed small? The question hung in the air. I don't know, my father said finally. Maybe not. And that makes me ashamed. Here's the thing, I said, my voice steady. I don't need your validation anymore. I spent 15 years desperate for you to see me, to believe in me, to recognize that I was capable and brilliant and worthy. And now? I don't care. I've built a life where people value what I create, not which school I attended. I've surrounded myself with people who respect substance over pedigree. I'm happy. We want to be part of your life again, my mother said. Why should I let you? Silence. Because we're your parents, she said finally. That's not a reason. That's an obligation you think I owe you. You have to give me an actual reason. My father took a breath. Because we want to change. Because we recognize what we lost. Because even if you never forgive us, we need you to know that we were wrong, and we're sorry, and we want to do better. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I'll think about it, I said. But understand something. I'm not the daughter who needs your approval anymore. If you want to be in my life, it'll be on my terms. No more dismissiveness. No more comparisons. No more credential worship. If you can't respect me as I am, we have nothing to talk about. I left before they could respond. It's February 2026 now. CareStream AI has 27 clients across 8 states. We just closed a $25 million Series B. We're profitable. Our technology actually works. 94% claims processing accuracy. 68% average reduction in administrative costs. We've been approached by several acquirers, including 2 major healthcare companies. The offers have ranged from $85 million to $20 million. I'm not selling, not yet. Maybe not ever. This was never about the exit. Brandon gets out of prison in 2036. He'll be 44 years old. I wonder sometimes if he understands what he did. Not the fraud, that's obvious, but the deeper betrayal, taking someone's trust, their work, their dream, and treating it as raw material for his own ambition. I see my parents occasionally, holidays, brief visits. The relationship is cordial but not close. They're trying, I think, but there are some fractures that never fully heal. Marcus and I have rebuilt our relationship. He called me 6 months after Brandon's sentencing and said, "I was wrong about you. I bought into Mom and Dad's narrative. You were always the brilliant one. I just had the shinier diploma." We have dinner once a month now. It's good. My best revenge. It's not the $8 million settlement or Brandon's prison sentence. It's this: I built something real, something that actually helps people, something that works. Carestream just won Best Healthcare Innovation 2005 from the American Medical Association. When I accepted the award, I thanked my team, my CEO, my clients, and one person who's not here anymore. My grandmother, who died when I was 20, who always told me, "Jessica, smart is as smart does. Don't let anyone tell you that credentials matter more than character." She was right. If you've made it this far, thank you. If this story touched you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories like this. And remember, your worth is not determined by how your family treats you. Sometimes the truth is punishment enough. Real family is chosen, not assigned. The business idea my parents gave away. It's thriving, just not in the hands they imagined.